The deafening roar of thunder drowned out Sarah's desperate screams as she clawed at the wet sand, trying to reach her 5-year-old son, Tyler. The raging waves had swept him several feet beyond the shoreline, his small head barely visible among the churning foam. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as flashbacks of her own childhood, near-drowning incident at Lake Michigan surged through her mind. Her brother had saved her then. Would anyone save Tyler now? Rocky, their 3-year-old Labrador, dove fearlessly into the turbulent waters, a gift from Sarah's late father, who had been a Coast Guard rescue swimmer for 20 years. "Dogs have instincts we can only dream of understanding," he'd told her when presenting the puppy 3 Christmases ago. If only he were here now. 30 minutes earlier, the Patterson family had been enjoying their annual summer getaway at Beachside Haven, the same coastal town where Mark had proposed to Sarah 8 years ago beneath the old lighthouse that still stood sentinel over the beach. They'd returned every summer since, even during Sarah's difficult pregnancy with Tyler, when doctors had advised against travel due to her hypertension. The weather forecast from meteorologist Dana Richards had predicted a clear day with only a slight chance of afternoon showers. Mark had gone to pick up lunch from Captain Molly's seafood shack, run by a retired lighthouse keeper who'd lost her husband to the sea 15 years ago. The restaurant walls were covered in maritime memorabilia and rescue stories that had fascinated Tyler yesterday when Captain Molly herself had shown him an old compass that supposedly belonged to a 19th century explorer. "I'll be right back," Mark had promised, kissing Sarah's cheek before jogging down the beach, leaving her to watch Tyler and Rocky while chatting with Eleanor, a fellow vacationer from Minnesota who had just left to check on her own children after mentioning something odd about the water's unusual retreat. Sarah now felt the weight of that casual goodbye as she watched her husband's distant figure running back toward them, too far away to help as their son struggled against forces no 5-year-old could comprehend. The lifeguard chair stood empty. Braden, who was supposed to be on duty, had stepped away to help an elderly tourist who had fallen on the boardwalk. A gull cried overhead, adding its shrill voice to the chaos unfolding on what should have been just another perfect day in their family album. Rocky had been acting strangely all morning, refusing to go near the water, pacing along the shoreline with perked ears and stiff tail. This was unusual for a dog who typically loved swimming so much that the Pattersons had installed a small pool in their backyard specifically for him, complete with a custom ramp Mark had built during lockdown 2 years ago. His odd behavior reminded Sarah of the night before Tyler was born, when Rocky had refused to leave her side, hours before her water broke 3 weeks early, the night Dr. Winters later called the closest call of my obstetric career. The Labrador would occasionally stop to stare out at the horizon beyond the Miller's Cove rocks, emitting low whines that Sarah dismissed as excitement, or perhaps mild seasickness from yesterday's impromptu sailing trip with the Hendersons, a retired couple who owned a small catamaran named Second Wind. "He's probably just tired from yesterday's adventure," Sarah had told Tyler when he asked why Rocky wouldn't play fetch in the shallow waters like he usually did. But Rocky's strange behavior persisted with increasing urgency. He would gently tug at Sarah's beach cover-up, a blue floral pattern that had belonged to her mother who had passed away from breast cancer just months before Tyler's birth. Whenever she tried to settle into her chair, the dog positioned himself between Tyler and the ocean each time the boy moved toward the water, sometimes even growling softly, something former canine handler James Wheeler, who was setting up his beach chair nearby, noticed with professional interest. "Your dog seems concerned about something in the water," he'd commented, but Sarah had politely dismissed his observation. Sarah noticed dark clouds gathering on the horizon beyond where the Johnson family lighthouse stood, but they seemed distant enough not to worry about. Dr. Reyes, a meteorologist vacationing in the adjacent cottage, had mentioned at breakfast that the pressure system looked stable despite the regional weather service issuing a small craft advisory for areas further north. Local beachgoers, including the Collins twins who visited every summer from Seattle, hadn't started packing up yet, and the lifeguard station still flew the green flag indicating safe swimming conditions. Though Jake, the usual lifeguard who knew the local waters like the back of his hand, had been replaced by someone Sarah didn't recognize, a younger man who seemed more interested in his phone than the water conditions. "Rocky, what's gotten into you?" Sarah had murmured after the dog had barked at a perfectly innocent-looking wave that had washed around Tyler's ankles. She couldn't have known that Rocky was displaying the same alert behavior that search and rescue dogs exhibit when they've detected danger. What Sarah couldn't know was that Rocky's behavior wasn't random or inexplicable. The Labrador's sensitive ears, which had once helped locate a lost child during last year's community Easter egg hunt at Mayfield Park, had been picking up infrasonic sounds produced by the rapidly forming storm system far offshore. These were the same type of sound waves that Bethany Parker, a marine researcher at the nearby Coastal Sciences Institute, had been studying for her doctoral thesis on predicting coastal disasters. Rocky could sense the subtle pressure changes that preceded the phenomenon locals called sneaker waves, abnormally large coastal waves that appear without warning, even in relatively calm conditions. Old Captain Harris, who had run the bait shop near the pier for 47 years and walked with a pronounced limp from his own battle with the sea, had lost his younger brother to such a wave back in '78, a story that had become something of a local legend. These dangerous waves had claimed several lives along this stretch of coastline over the years, including the teenage daughter of Mayor Whitfield, a tragedy that had prompted the installation of warning systems further up the beach near Osprey Point. Systems that hadn't yet reached this particular cove where the Pattersons preferred to set up due to its quieter atmosphere and tide pools that fascinated Tyler. The cove, known to locals as Whispering Sands for the peculiar sound the fine grains made when disturbed by certain wind conditions, was slated for its own warning system next spring, following a town council vote that had passed just last month after intense lobbying from local activist Gloria Hammond, whose son had nearly drowned there 2 summers ago. Sarah and Mark, being occasional visitors whose annual 2-week stay coincided with the typically calm season, were unaware of this specific risk. Rocky, however, with his acute canine senses inherited from generations of water rescue dogs, his grandfather had been awarded a medal by the governor for saving a family of 4 during the great floods of 2010, had been trying to warn them for the past hour. In fact, just yesterday, marine biologist Dr. James Chen had given a public lecture at the community center about animal sensory perception and environmental disasters, specifically mentioning how dogs can detect changes in barometric pressure and ocean patterns long before sophisticated equipment. Sarah and Mark had considered attending, but opted instead for a sunset stroll along the boardwalk, unaware of how relevant that information would soon become to their lives. Professor Emilia Gonzalez, who specialized in animal cognition at State University, would later cite Rocky's behavior in her landmark paper on predictive responses in domesticated animals, noting how his actions perfectly aligned with documented cases of animals sensing natural disasters before they occurred. The atmospheric pressure continued dropping, creating the faint earache Sarah had attributed to seasonal allergies rather than the warning signs sailors like her grandfather would have immediately recognized. Rocky's anxiety visibly increased, his normally smooth golden coat bristling along his spine, the same reaction he'd had last winter when he'd sensed the gas leak in their basement before any human noticed. He barked sharply when Tyler wandered closer to the receding tide line, a telltale sign that the ocean was pulling back to gather force, something Diana Martinez, the marine safety officer who had given a presentation at Tyler's school last spring, had specifically warned children about. If the water runs away from the beach, you run away from the water. Sarah called Tyler to come back, using the special whistle signal they had practiced for emergencies during their family safety drills. But her attention was momentarily diverted when their beach umbrella, a sturdy model Mark had specifically purchased after their last one collapsed during a family reunion, suddenly tipped over in a strong gust of wind that seemed to come from nowhere. The umbrella nearly hit Zoe McDaniel, a college student reading nearby who was researching coastal phenomena for her environmental science thesis, who jumped up in alarm, her paperback novel on coastal legends compiled by local historian Edward Bailey tumbling into the sand. "That wind came out of nowhere," she exclaimed, glancing nervously at the water. That's when it happened, the moment that would later become the focus of Dr. Hayward's case study on predictive animal behavior at Central State University. The first sneaker wave surged forward with shocking speed and force, stretching far beyond the normal tide line where the Henderson children had built an elaborate sand castle just yesterday that had won the annual beach contest, judged by local artist Marion Fletcher. Tyler, caught unaware while collecting shells for the science project he was planning to show his kindergarten teacher, Ms. Wilkins, after summer break, a kind woman who had helped Tyler overcome his shyness, had no time to react as the powerful water swept his small body off his feet and pulled him seaward. Sarah's heart stopped as she witnessed her son vanish under the foaming crest, her mind flashing back to the water safety course she had taken at the YMCA after her own near drowning. The colorful bucket Tyler had been carrying, a souvenir from their visit to the aquarium in Charleston last month, floated briefly on the surface before disappearing as well, a cruel reminder of childhood innocence suddenly threatened by nature's unpredictable power. "Tyler!" Sarah screamed, her voice barely carrying over the sudden wind that whipped her hair across her face, temporarily blinding her to the full horror unfolding merely 20 yards away. Rocky reacted instantly, his rescue instincts triggering like those of his grandmother, Bella, who had won medals in dock diving competitions across 3 states. He sprinted toward the ocean, leaving deep paw prints in the wet sand that would later be photographed by local newspaper reporter Margot Chen for her front-page story titled, "Four-Legged Hero Defies Deadly Waters." The Labrador dove into the churning waters without hesitation, his powerful swimming legs, strengthened by the hydrotherapy sessions at Dr. Winter's Veterinary Rehabilitation Center after he'd injured his hip, chasing a delivery truck last winter, propelled him through the violent current. Sarah scrambled to her feet, screaming for help as the storm closed in with surprising speed. Jasper Donovan, an off-duty Coast Guard trainee building sandcastles with his niece 50 yards down the beach, heard Sarah's cries and immediately recognized the emergency unfolding. Having completed water rescue training just 3 weeks earlier under Commander Phillips, Jasper sprang into action, unclipping the rescue whistle he habitually carried on his keychain since his brother's near drowning in the Chesapeake Bay. The distinctive 3-blast emergency signal cut through the wind, alerting others to the unfolding crisis and catching the attention of Lisa Morales, a registered nurse sunbathing nearby, who immediately began scanning for any signs of the child in the water. The Labrador reached Tyler just as a second larger wave, what oceanographer Dr. Maxwell would later classify as a Category 3 displacement wave in his published analysis, threatened to push the boy further from shore toward the dangerous undertow. Rocky managed to grab Tyler's t-shirt, a blue one with dinosaurs that had been a birthday gift from his grandmother Elizabeth, gently between his teeth, keeping the boy's head above water as he fought against the powerful current. The dog had been a strong swimmer since puppyhood, when Sarah's father had trained him using techniques learned during his 20 years of Coast Guard service, including the specialized cycle swim pattern that conserved energy during long-distance water rescues. Those lessons, practiced in the calm waters of Silver Lake every summer weekend, were now being put to the ultimate test. Sarah waded in as far as she dared, the water already up to her waist, when she spotted Rocky swimming determinedly toward her with Tyler in tow. Martin and Eliza Rodriguez, who had been parasailing further down the beach when they noticed the commotion, rushed to help, forming a human chain with 3 other beachgoers to reach further into the turbulent water. "Hold on! We've got you!" Martin shouted as they managed to grab Tyler's arm, pulling both boy and dog towards safety through waves that continued to grow in size and force as the unexpected storm intensified. They finally reached shore with Tyler coughing up seawater, but conscious, his small chest heaving with effort as he expelled the ocean that had nearly claimed him. Rocky immediately positioned himself beside the boy, licking his face and whining softly as if performing his own version of a medical assessment, something Sarah would later learn was instinctive behavior in rescue dogs. The Labrador's fur was matted with sand and seaweed, a far cry from his usually pristine golden coat that won compliments from strangers whenever they visited Dogwood Park back home in Maplewood. "He saved him," Sarah sobbed to the gathered crowd, her voice breaking with emotion as she cradled Tyler against her chest, feeling his heartbeat, rapid but strong, as the most precious rhythm in her universe. Among the concerned onlookers was Evelyn Winters, a retired pediatric nurse who had been collecting shells with her grandson when the commotion began. With steady hands that had tended to thousands of children over a 40-year career at Mercy Children's Hospital, she quickly checked Tyler's vital signs, while another beachgoer, Miguel Santos, draped his dry beach towel around the shivering boy. "Get him warm right away," Evelyn instructed, her authoritative tone cutting through Sarah's panic. "He seems okay, but watch for delayed symptoms of secondary drowning." Miguel's wife, Lucia, a former lifeguard, was already on the phone with emergency services, giving precise coordinates for their location using the beach's numbered marker system. By the time Mark returned, sprinting across the beach with abandoned food containers scattering their contents behind him, the local emergency responders had arrived. Paramedic Jake Freeman, whose own daughter had been saved from drowning 3 years ago, confirmed Tyler was shaken but remarkably unharmed thanks to Rocky's swift intervention and the fact that Tyler had instinctively remembered to hold his breath when submerged, a skill his swim instructor, former Olympic hopeful Melissa Chen, had drilled into him. "The dog knew," said Harold Jenkins, an elderly local who had helped pull them from the water despite his arthritic hands that had spent 60 years working the fishing boats. "Animals sense these things. We call them sneaker waves. They come without much warning. Your dog was trying to alert you all morning, I'd bet." Officer Diane Collins, who had responded to the emergency call, was already taking notes for her incident report while radioing in to cancel the helicopter rescue that had been dispatched from Coast Guard Station, Port Harbor. "You're very lucky," she told the Pattersons, her expression serious beneath her regulation cap. "We've had 3 drownings from sneaker waves in this county already this season. Your dog deserves a medal." As a small crowd gathered around them, Rocky remained vigilant beside Tyler, occasionally looking toward the ocean as if to confirm the danger had passed, a guardian whose instincts had proven sharper than any weather forecast or human perception. In the following days, the Patterson family learned more about sneaker waves and the signs that precede them, signs that humans often miss but animals frequently detect. The local newspaper, the Beachside Gazette, ran a front-page story about Rocky's heroism, written by veteran reporter Gerald Thompson, who had covered maritime stories for 3 decades. The article interviewed Dr. Camila Rodriguez, a marine biologist specializing in coastal phenomena, who explained that dogs can sense barometric pressure changes and hear low-frequency sounds that signal weather and oceanic disturbances long before they become apparent to humans. "What we're learning about animal sensory perception could revolutionize our early warning systems," she noted in the piece, which was later picked up by national media outlets. "Rocky wasn't just being difficult," the biologist was quoted saying. "He was trying to communicate a very real danger to his family, using the only tools available to him, his behavior." The article included a sidebar about other documented cases of animals predicting natural disasters, from elephants fleeing before tsunamis to cats going missing before earthquakes. Tyler became something of a local celebrity at the hospital, where Dr. Amanda Liu had insisted on keeping him overnight for observation, following protocol for near-drowning incidents. The boy cheerfully told every nurse and doctor about his superhero dog, though he admitted to having been scared when the big water grabbed me. Mark spent hours researching sneaker waves on his laptop in the hospital waiting room, discovering that the phenomenon was more common and deadlier than most tourists realized. He learned about the specific conditions that created them: weather patterns, underwater topography, and pressure systems, all factors that Rocky had somehow sensed through instincts honed by evolution. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself repeatedly returning to the moment when Rocky had first started acting strangely, mentally cataloging all the signs she had dismissed. "I kept thinking he was just being overprotective or moody," she confided to Eleanor, who had visited them at the hospital with homemade cookies and a hand-drawn get-well card from her children. "Now I realize he was the only one who actually understood what was happening." Coast Guard Lieutenant Michael Barnes visited them on the second day, bringing a special commemorative collar tag for Rocky that read, "Canine Hero, Beachside Haven Rescue 2025. The official recognition brought tears to Sarah's eyes as she attached it to Rocky's collar, while the lieutenant explained how even their sophisticated equipment sometimes failed to predict sneaker waves in time for proper warnings. "Sometimes the best technology is right at our feet," he said, scratching Rocky behind the ears while the dog basked in the attention, seeming to understand he had done something important. "We're actually developing a program to study how working dogs respond to changing weather and water conditions. Your experience could help save other families." The experience transformed their relationship with Rocky. What they had once seen as simple pet loyalty, they now recognized as something far deeper: an ancient, instinctive connection between species, where one could perceive dangers invisible to the other. The Pattersons completed their vacation, though they relocated to accommodations further inland at the Hillside Lodge, where manager Sophia Williams had heard their story and offered them a complimentary upgrade to a suite overlooking the entire coastline. Rocky received special treats daily, along with a new life jacket that Mark insisted on purchasing, just in case, from Coastal Canine Outfitters, where owner Brian Mitchell refused payment after hearing their story and instead asked them to participate in his upcoming water safety demonstration for pet owners. Tyler, recovering quickly as children often do, had drawn numerous pictures of Super Rocky swimming through giant waves to save him, artwork that now decorated their hotel room walls and would later be framed in their home study. Each morning, Mark consulted the weather report with new attention to detail, comparing it with Rocky's demeanor as they took their breakfast on the lodge's covered patio. "He's relaxed today," Mark would announce, noting the dog's calm posture and easy movements. "I think we're clear for some inland exploration." They spent their remaining vacation days hiking forest trails, visiting the local aquarium, where Tyler was given a special behind-the-scenes tour by marine educator Rachel Foster, and enjoying picnics in the sculpture garden of the Regional Art Museum, all safely away from the unpredictable ocean that had nearly taken their son. At Dr. Liu's suggestion, they arranged for Tyler to have a session with child psychologist Dr. Nathan Park, who specialized in trauma-related anxiety in young children. To everyone's relief, Tyler showed remarkable resilience, describing his rescue with excitement rather than fear, though he did ask to sleep with Rocky in his room each night, a request his parents readily granted. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their rental cottage watching the sunset paint the distant water in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah noticed Rocky's relaxed posture and gently wagging tail, a stark contrast to his behavior on that frightening day. The dog lay contentedly at Tyler's feet, while the boy carefully colored in another heroic portrait of his canine savior. "I keep thinking about how many warnings he gave us," she said quietly to Mark as they sipped local wine from glasses provided by the thoughtful lodge staff. "If we'd understood what he was trying to tell us earlier." Mark nodded, reaching down to scratch behind Rocky's ears. "We know better now. Sometimes the ones who can't speak our language are trying the hardest to communicate the most important messages." He gazed at their son, safe and happy, despite what could have been a tragic ending to their story. I think we need to become fluent in Rocky." Sarah smiled, watching as Tyler wrapped his small arms around the dog's neck in a gentle hug that Rocky accepted with dignified patience. "I think you're right. This is one language lesson we can't afford to miss." The family returned home with a new awareness of Rocky's behavior patterns. They researched more about canine sensory capabilities and started paying closer attention to his reactions, particularly during their outdoor adventures. Mark installed a barometric pressure monitor in their home, noting with fascination how Rocky's behavior often changed before the device registered significant drops, sometimes up to 6 hours before a storm system arrived. "It's like having our own furry meteorologist," he remarked to their neighbor, retired science teacher Harriet Blackwell, who became so intrigued she began keeping her own log of animal behavior patterns before weather events, eventually turning it into a citizen science project for the local middle school where she volunteered. Sarah joined an online forum for pet owners who had experienced similar phenomena, where she connected with Miranda Chen, whose border collie had alerted her family to an impending landslide in Oregon by refusing to let them hike their usual trail. The two women exchanged stories and articles about animal perception, developing a friendship that would eventually lead to a collaborative blog on the subject. They also became advocates for beach safety, working with local animal therapy programs to develop educational materials about recognizing warning signs in nature, including animal behavior, that might indicate dangerous conditions. The initiative caught the attention of Regional Safety Commissioner Thomas Blackwood, who invited them to participate in a public awareness campaign that would be distributed to coastal communities along the eastern seaboard. Tyler, though young, participated enthusiastically in these presentations, proudly telling anyone who would listen about how Rocky had saved his life. His kindergarten teacher, Ms. Wilkins, invited him and Rocky, with special permission from the principal, to give a show-and-tell presentation that became so popular it was repeated for 3 other classes. Tyler's confidence blossomed as he shared his experience, and Ms. Wilkins noted in her progress report that the incident, while frightening, had helped him develop remarkable public speaking skills for his age. Dr. Caroline Foster, the veterinarian who had cared for Rocky since puppyhood, was fascinated by the accounts of his predictive behavior and suggested genetic testing to determine if he carried markers associated with heightened sensory perception. "Some bloodlines really do have special capabilities," she explained during Rocky's checkup. "We're learning more about the genetics of these traits, and Rocky might help advance that research." Mark began taking Rocky and Tyler to the local lake for swimming practice every weekend, both to maintain Rocky's rescue skills and to strengthen Tyler's confidence in the water. Under the watchful eye of swimming instructor Kevin Thompson, who specialized in childhood water trauma, Tyler gradually overcame his initial fear and even learned basic life-saving techniques appropriate for his age. "Dogs have been working alongside humans for thousands of years," Kevin remarked as they watched Rocky demonstrate perfect form in the water. "But I think we're only beginning to understand just how much they're trying to tell us." The following summer, as they planned their beach vacation at a different location with better safety monitoring and a dedicated canine-friendly beach section, they noticed Rocky's calm demeanor as they packed. Unlike the previous year, he showed no signs of distress as they loaded the car, instead sitting patiently by the door, tail wagging in apparent anticipation. "I think this is going to be a good trip," Sarah said, running her hand along Rocky's golden coat, recently groomed by the meticulous Antonio at Pampered Paws, who had refused payment after hearing Rocky's story. "Our own personal early warning system approves." They had chosen Silver Sands Beach, known for its excellent safety record and state-of-the-art warning system designed by coastal engineer Patricia Morton, who had lost her brother to a rip current 20 years earlier and had dedicated her career to preventing similar tragedies. The beach featured clearly marked swimming zones, regular patrols, and an innovative flag system that indicated water conditions with greater specificity than traditional methods. Upon arrival, they were greeted by head lifeguard Marcus Johnson, who recognized Rocky from the newspaper stories and immediately presented him with an honorary beach patrol bandana. "We have a special area where dogs with good water skills can swim," he explained to an excited Tyler. "We actually work with rescue dogs here during off-season training." Their beachfront cottage, carefully selected for its proximity to high ground and multiple evacuation routes, Mark had become somewhat obsessive about safety planning, featured a covered porch where Rocky could keep watch over the water while staying cool in the shade. The owners, retired couple Jim and Barbara Reynolds, had left a basket of dog treats with a note that read, "For our hero visitor." On their first morning at the beach, Rocky showed none of the anxiety that had marked their previous vacation. He trotted happily alongside Tyler as they explored the shoreline, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting shells or chase seagulls, but never exhibiting the stressed behavior that had preceded last year's disaster. "Look, Mom," Tyler called out, pointing to Rocky rolling contentedly in a patch of warm sand. "He's smiling today, no sneaker waves coming." The boy had developed a remarkable attentiveness to his dog's moods, often checking Rocky's behavior before venturing into new situations, a cautious awareness that Sarah and Mark encouraged, while being careful not to nurture unnecessary fears. As they set up their beach umbrella, a new model with additional anchoring features and a built-in wind vent, Sarah watched Rocky play fetch in the gentle surf, his powerful legs propelling him through the water with joyful energy rather than desperate urgency. Mark stood beside her, one arm around her shoulders, the other holding a waterproof weather radio that he'd probably never need but carried anyway. "I think we're going to be okay," he said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "All of us." Sarah nodded, watching as Tyler laughed at Rocky's antics, the sound of their child's happiness the most precious thing she'd ever heard. The Patterson family had learned a profound lesson about the intuitive wisdom of their four-legged family member, a wisdom that transcended language and stemmed from senses far more attuned to the natural world than their own. Rocky's beach rescue hadn't just saved Tyler's life, it had opened their eyes to a different way of perceiving their environment and reminded them that sometimes the most important alerts come not in words, but in the persistent warnings of those who see the world through different, often clearer, eyes. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.